Hi, Penelope.
Oh, Penelope! Thank God.
Okay, we have to start right now.
Okay.
Come here, meow meow.
Welcome to another episode of today's Anatomy Question. I'm Lizzie Lasater, and joining me as always is Mary Richards, and special guest for today's Hamstring Symposium is Judith Hanson Lasater. We can also see Penelope is already made her entrance, and in our live studio audience we have Carol Balfe. Hi. She's part of the anatomy community. So this is all about experientialanatomy.yoga. Go to the website, get in the loop, and you can hear about the course when it launches. So our topic today is Hamstring Symposium. Episode 23 of this series on YouTube, if you haven't watched that, go back, because we're responding to some of the comments, was about bending your knees when you practice Uttanasana, standing forward fold, which many of us in a flow practice will do 25 times in a 90-minute class. Mm-hmm. So Mary, can you start us out? People don't seem as comfortable from the comments and the feedback that we got from episode 23 of today's anatomy question. People don't seem as comfortable with the idea of bending the knees. Can you make the case maybe in a new way or refine your point?
Mm-hmm. So what I read when I read through the comments, and we do try to keep up with the comments, is that it seems that this idea of bending the knees, we're using it as an instructional request to with a very, very well intentioned, which is to facilitate ease for our students when they're practicing Uttanasana. And so if you notice your student is tighter in the hamstrings and they have inhibited AP rotation of the pelvis, meaning it's more difficult for them to roll the acetabular fossa over and around the head, the convex heads of the femurs, bend the knees. The problem with, there are a couple of issues with that, with bending the knees in Uttanasana, which in my experience is an extended knee standing forward fold. Is that when you bend the knees, you're overriding the functional intention of Uttanasana, which is an extended knee forward fold designed to challenge the hamstrings along the length of that functional muscle group. And it's also a posture of introspection and pratyahara. And then we ask our students who seem to have inhibitions in rotation of the pelvis, rounded back, tighter hamstrings, we say bend your knees, it'll make it easier. But the problem with that is that we're still then, we then say now lift your sitting bones, your ischial tuberosities up, and it creates disproportionate strain at the attachment of the hamstring tendons at the ischial tuberosity. And it sets us up for something called yoga butt.
So, Mary.
Yes, Mom.
You're
wiggling.
I'm excited. So, this is what I hear you saying, is that when the hamstrings are tighter than we want them to be, and we bend forward, we have a posterior rotated pelvis, rounded back, and we're just making the kyphosis greater, the upper back rounding. And so the idea, I understand why we might go to the idea of bending the knees, because now we've taken the stretch off the hamstrings. Mm-hmm. But we've done two other things. We've taken the stretch off the hamstrings, but we've now actually loaded them as to help stabilize the knee. And then we allow, and not only is it possible, but we actually tell our students to lift the sitting bones. So they bend the knees and then they lift the sitting bone, and they can get that movement now, and they keep doing that, and that can overstretch the origin of the hamstrings. That's what I understood.
Yes. And
it helps them do the wrong thing.
Exactly. It reinforces a dysfunctional pattern and a compensatory pattern that's not serving the greater good of the body. And we don't want to overload insertions in particular where tendinous muscle attachments connect to bone, because that's where the tissue is most vulnerable. And
we have a bursa right there too, which can get irritated.
And you can have ischial bursitis where the bursa will get inflamed, and then it's painful to sit. It's you know, we can set up a cascade of reactions that aren't conducive to a comfortable body. And
so can a hamstring ever be too stretched? I mean, I think most of us in yoga sort of feel like we want to get the deeper the Paschimottanasana, the more spiritually evolved.
Sure, it can be too stretched. When it detaches and zips up the back of the leg, then it's definitely too stretched. But the thing is, we also have a bias towards stretching the hamstrings in asana practice, that the hamstring group, those are long, skinny muscles, and I believe that we actually need to spend a little more time stretching the quadriceps, the hip flexors, because those are
the calves.
Yes, and the calves.
For many people in the West, especially.
Yes. Lizzie's frozen.
Lizzie is frozen in a wonderful expression. So Mary.
Here, she's back.
Are you back? So can we see what you like and how you would teach a person with tight hamstrings to do a standing forward bend?
Yes. So Lizzie, would you be willing to go to the wall? Ooh. I see you have blocks. Nearby.
Hold on. Let me put my ponytail.
Yoga hair.
So what I like, just to offer a preface for what we're about to do, what I like to bring the earth up to the student. Instead of trying to shove a square peg into a round hole and try to get the hands down on the floor, I like to use blocks. And it's easier than we might expect to incorporate blocks into our practice if we just have them nearby. So Lizzie has pretty cooperative hamstrings. But Lizzie, let's pretend you don't have cooperative hamstrings.
I did some practice with my husband this weekend, and literally this is where he started. Yes,
and that's really common, actually, especially for people who cycle and run a lot. Bicyclists in particular will have tighter hamstrings, and they're also more prone to ischial bursitis because they are sitting in a semi-flexed knee position, working with active resistance constantly. So it's like being in bent knee uttanasana the entire time they're on the cycle.
And the cycle, whoever invented that seat was a reincarnated medieval torturer. That banana seat where you bend your knee and you thin the gluteus maximus and you expose the sciatic nerve to repetitive stress injury of pressing it against that so-called seat.
Yes, yes. So Lizzie, take a moment and I'd like you to bend the knees. Bend the knees in Uttanasana and hang forward. Please do not lift your sitting bones, however. And I'd like you to tell me how that feels.
Yeah, it feels okay. I mean,
yeah,
it does feel a sense, there is a sense of relief. I mean, there is a sense of, you know, I feel a stretch here, and then when I bend, it feels like, oh, this I could stay a lot longer.
Yeah, because you've gotten around your hamstrings essentially. And the other thing that you've done is you've destabilized your knees a bit, because the knee's most stable position is an extension. That's when it has the most bony congruence. So when you bend the knees, you're actually you're reducing the bony congruence in the knee, which then travels up into the hip. And that's going to affect the relationship between the hip and the pelvis. So now, please don't do this, but if you then were abided with the instructional request to lift your sitting bones, you would feel a lot more sensation at the attachment point of the hamstrings.
Yeah, I know that.
And that's where we don't want to feel it. So instead, to embody Uttanasana, now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to place your hands on the blocks and press away from the earth.
Bingo.
Yeah. What I also don't understand about this request, which I've heard 10,000 times about lifting the sit bones and bending the knees, is it seems as though they want me, this is obviously a forward bend,
Yes.
but somehow they're trying to coax me into also doing a back bend at the same time.
Yes, so that's another can of worms, and that'll often start from Tadasana. When we inhale, we instruct the students to inhale, take the arms up, then lift the chest and fold forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens then is we're hanging from the ligamentous structures and disrupting what's happening in the inner body. Yeah, and that puts even more strain on the attachments of the hamstrings as well. So what I prefer, oh, Lizzie, stop that.
I feel nauseous.
I recoil a bit from it because we're moving into flexion. We're going into the cave of the body. Not everything is a chest opener. And
wait, what? Say that again.
Not everything is a chest opener.
But
and so if we adjust our students' relationship with the earth by using props, putting blocks under the hands or a chair under the hands, or starting at the wall, squaring the box at the wall, we then develop a progression in asana. You know, I like to say, I like to have an escalation ladder. I want us to have somewhere to go. And we tend to want to get there, but really the journey is where we learn a lot. And so by taking our time working into a deeper Uttanasana, you know, we experience the pose differently. And each asana, it can't feed every aspect of a functional muscle unit. So I also am a big fan of strength. I teach from a perspective of stability to foster balanced mobility. So I wonder where you heard that from.
Would you make clear that when you were talking so artfully about not arching the lumbar and trying to think of this as a back bend as you come down, but would you also make clear why you don't want the opposite? Because I'm concerned that if people hear we don't want you arching as you come down, they might decide, oh, they must want me to, that, you know, that peeling down round thing, it's probably worse.
Yeah, let's skip the spontaneous crush fractures of the vertebral body and the posterior displacement of the intervertebral discs, right? So that
sounds bad.
When we're going down, we don't want to round down because that exponentially increases the shear force through the intervertebral discs. And we don't want that, especially when we consider that most of our students drive desks. A lot of them drive desks. So they spend a lot of time in lumbar flexion anyway with the intervertebral discs moving posteriorly. So we really want to maintain the normal curves of the spine. And the thing is, the body will figure that out because of the lumbosacral rhythm. It will know when to change. The lumbar spine will know when to change its position in relationship to gravity if we allow the body to lead us rather than the mind.
But I have to say, I mean, I practiced Ashtanga for years. And so that rhythm, even as I was just doing it, inhale, lift, and fold forward, even though I've been hearing what you guys are saying, and I agree with you here, when I went to do that movement, I wasn't doing it from here. I was doing it from this habit pattern. It's funny because even though if you asked me which way I want to come down, I would say maintaining the normal curves. That's maybe what I would teach. But in my own body, that is so established.
Oh, okay. So that's something called, it's neuromuscular patterning, neuromuscular integration. And something I'd like to share with you is that muscles aren't that smart, okay? But your nervous system is. And so all coordination, muscle patterning, coordination is stored in your central nervous system, which is a lovely thing because it allows us to have efficiency. You know, if we had to think about every action involved in taking a step or putting on socks and shoes, we'd never leave the bed. You know, so the central
Well,
nervous
that sounds kind of good.
so the central nervous system, you know, we've just habituated it. We've developed a neuronal net, a pattern of movement, and so it requires re-education. And this is where props can be so valuable, because props are not cheating. Newsflash, props are not cheating. Props allow us to find space and support. They're teaching tools that allow us to rewire the relationship between our central nervous system and our musculoskeletal system so that we can develop functional movement patterns.
You go, Mary. Okay, Mom, I love it. Can you talk me through, there's two things I want to do before we finish. Mom, will you talk me through how you would like students to transition from Tadasana to Uttanasana?
Okay, would you get up there
I'll
and
stand
do
up.
that?
Yeah. Let's try to make sure.
You need a cameraman.
I do. My cameraman has also kindly vacated the premises, so he's not.
All right,
making
you
any
need to
noise.
stand at 90 degrees to the camera. Yeah, come closer to us.
But then you don't see my head.
Oh yeah, that's okay. That's good. All right, now put your thumb on your lower ribs and your longest finger on the ASIS, the point of the hip in the front of the body. Now, if you round down, try that. The ribs are behind the pelvis, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
go arch the back as you go down. Now the ribs are ahead of the pelvis, yes?
Yes.
Not in line with it, but you can feel that with your fingers. I hope everyone's trying this with us. So if you drop the chin slightly, mostly from, no, not so much, a little bit from, yeah, a little from the top cervicals, and your eyes down, and now your attention's beginning to go inward. Mary was talking about that. We are closing the circle. We are going inward. So inhale the breath. Now exhale and come forward and keep the lower ribs and the hip bones moving at the same speed. Exhale, exhale, not too slowly. At one point you will go into flexion, but it will be past 90 degrees and will be a natural thing. Come back up again.
I really like that way of describing it, that it's almost as this relationship does not change. Because in both of the other examples, it changed. The space between my fingers literally changed.
So try it. Let's do it one more time. And now when you start to round, take your hands out so we can see it. Inhale your breath, slightly drop the brain, drop the attention. Exhale, come forward, keeping the ribs and the pelvis in line. And now you've got now right there, you start, yes. That looks so beautiful to me, Mary.
It really does. And you can really see the beautiful relationship between the hip joints and the ankle joints, because when you were distorting the normal curves of the spine, Lizzie, what was most noticeable to me was the projection of the sitting bones behind the heels, past the heels. Whereas when you maintained the normal curves of the vertebral column, it's a much more balanced relationship. Now, is there shift? Of course there's shift, because you're changing your relationship with gravity. But it, but you ended up where you needed to be, which was with a plumb line.
Yes. Straight line between the hips.
What
Hips,
about
knees, and
coming
ankles.
back up? Because I have to say, sometimes it feels really nice to roll up. Do you teach that?
So let's not
No.
confuse the familiar or the nice with the healthy. Okay?
What? You guys are blowing my mind.
Because see, when you're moving up, remember you're moving against gravity. And so if you're rolling up vertebra by vertebra, you're pushing the intervertebral discs back, back, back. And that's where the nerve rootlets lie. And it also strains the connective tissue structures of the vertebral column itself. And I'd like us not to do that. So we want to move from the transverse axis of the hips. We want the movement to come with the movement, the rotation of the pelvis over and around the heads of the femurs, because then we maintain the integrity of the body and we protect the intervertebral discs.
Can I teach you how to come up?
Yes,
Like
and
that?
we also wanted to show, yes, but we also wanted to show, what if somebody doesn't, how can we stretch the hamstrings even with the bent knees?
Yeah.
Do you want to do that on a separate episode, or do you want to just finish it here? Mom?
No, Mary. I'd like to show, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show coming up to sort of finish that loop. And then Mary takes, I think you can have it as a next episode, or you can do it now.
Yes.
Whatever you want.
So how do I come up?
All right. First, you have to go down. I don't know how for you to come up without going down. So put your finger, no, turn a little bit more to the side and come slightly closer to us. Yeah. Now come down, drop the chin, drop the brain, drop the intention. You're keeping the lump, all right, and right there you start rounding, yes? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I teach is for people to put their hands above their knees, straight, not too far above the knees, a little bit lower, and push straight with the legs, come up to about halfway, use the abdomen, using the abdomen, the abdomen muscles, abdominal muscles are stabilizing. Now pull down with the hamstrings and down with the sitting bones and keep, there you go.
Wow, that's new for me. I haven't done that with you.
What I like about that is when you're at about 90 degrees of hip flexion, if you're just hanging out there with your hands with no closed chain, that's when the intervertebral discs are particularly vulnerable.
Yes.
So by closing the chain and using a sort of active resistance within the body, it helps stabilize the transition.
I'd like to show one more thing about that. Could I, Mary? Mm-hmm. All right. Can you go to the wall and put your tailbone on the wall? Yeah. Maybe move the props a little bit out of the way, our visual field. Yeah. Especially those. This is us just hanging out doing yoga across the sky. That's lovely.
This is what we do.
This is what we do. This is our life. All right. Separate your feet a little more and straighten your legs and put your tailbone on the wall. This is something that I teach beginners a lot, because we all say use the pelvis and they don't know what you mean. So drop the chin. And I say now. All right. When you go down, you feel your tailbone on the wall, Lizzie?
Yes.
All right. Inhale the breath. Exhale, come down, keeping the normal curve, and move the tailbone up the wall, up the wall, up the wall, up the wall, up the wall. So you in order to protect the back, in my book, what I like is for you to be past 90 degrees before the tailbone starts moving. Otherwise, I want my students to come up and turn around and put your hands on the wall. Now, even higher up, some of them will be higher up. And with good alignment of the feet, turn the heels out. Keep the abdominals are slightly active, but no, not that much. You want a little more lumbar. Yeah, there you go. And that will stretch your hamstrings without hurting the back.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two things I'd like to suggest to our viewers.
Yes, and also by adjusting the width of base, you know how when you were at the wall, Lizzie, with your back to the wall, and you took your feet away from the wall, and you also made them a bit wider. If students have less cooperative hamstrings, if they separate their feet more, a wider base, that'll make it easier for them to find that action of rolling the pelvis over and around the heads of the femurs.
Okay, wonderful. Before we close, because so many people know this pose, Mary, quickly, just talk to us like anatomists and physiologists that we are becoming. Explain, and I'll quickly do what's going on in Supta Padangusthasana when I bend the knee, and why stretching the hamstring there is different than bending the knee in Uttanasana.
Okay, so in Supta Padangusthasana, or the reclining hand to foot pose, first we've eliminated gravity. Okay, so unlike Uttanasana, where we're working against and with gravity, now we've eliminated it. So if your pelvis is stable and you bend your knee, you can feel stretch in the hamstring. Yes.
I mean, yes.
Yes.
I don't, but one might.
And so this is actually a really nice way to start for students, because A, we've removed gravity, and B, it's an open chain. Your feet aren't planted on anything. So you have exit strategies. You have a way to get out, and it's safe to bend the knee here because you're not fighting with gravity, and you're not arguing with the pelvis. And
what's different about the pelvis here?
And you're in lumbar flexion.
Yes.
Which is good, which is fine. In this position, it doesn't matter if you're in lumbar flexion, because you're not standing up and don't have the effects of gravity. So it's okay. You can recruit lumbar flexion, because you always recruit lumbar flexion in all forward bends. Everyone, and I sat 6 inches from BKS Iyengar, who I think our viewers will accept as an expert witness, watching him do Paschimottanasana, seated forward bend. And at one point, he went into flexion, because forward bends are about flexion. But when you do it lying down, it's more protective for the person who's tight.
Yes. Yes. Sing
okay. Thank you for joining us for this hamstring symposium. If you want more of this type of conversation in this community of anatomy enthusiasts, please go to experientialanatomy.yoga, and you can join our list. Mom, tell us where we can find you on the internet.
You can find me at judithhansonlasater.com or lasater.yoga.
Or Facebook. You have a great Facebook page where you post funny yoga jokes.
Did you see the one for today?
Yes.
Yeah. It's about a dog.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Okay, Mary, where can we find you on the internet?
At maryrichardsyoga.com, and on Facebook at A Little Yoga Goes a Long Way.
Okay, I'm LizzieLasater.com, Instagram, Facebook. Bye, you guys.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. Happy
Bye,
hamstrings.
Carol.
Bye, Carol.
Bye.